They came to us as gods, and we like fools took them at their word. C'tan the Deceiver, Azagora the Nightbringer, Eshadora the Endless Worm. I curse their names, and the names of all their malevolent brethren. Welcome back guys to another video. In this one, we'll be talking about Szarekh, the last in the line of silent kings to lead the ruling Triarch of the ancient necrontyr empire. So let's do this. From the earliest days, the individual necrontyr dynasties were themselves governed by the overarching Triarch, a ruling council of 3 senior pharaohs. The head of the Triarch was known as the Silent King, for he addressed his subjects only through the other 2 pharaohs who ruled alongside him. Nominally a hereditary position, the uncertain lifespans of the necrontyr ensured that the title of Silent King nonetheless passed from one royal dynasty to another many times. Thus, it was that the final days of the necrontyr occurred in the reign of Szarekh, the last of the Silent Kings. It was during the reign of Szarekh that the godlike energy beings known as the C'tan first blighted the necrontyr. It is impossible to say for certain how the necrontyr first came to encounter the C'tan. The dusty archives of Solomon's claim it was by accident, a chance discovery made by a stellar probe during the investigation of a dying star. The Book of Mournful Night, held under close guard in the Black Library's innermost sanctum, tells rather that the raw hatred that the necrontyr held for the Old Ones sang out across space, acting as a beacon the C'tan could not ignore. Howsoever contact occurred, the shadow of the C'tan fell over the oldest dynasties first. Some necrontyr actively sought the C'tan's favor and oversaw the forging of living metal bodies to contain the star god's nebulous essence. Thus clad, the C'tan took the shapes of the necrontyr's half-forgotten gods, hiding their own desires beneath cloaks of obsequious subservience. So it was that one of the C'tan came before the Silent King, acting as a forerunner to the coming of his brothers. Amongst its own kind, this C'tan was known as the Deceiver, for it was willfully treacherous. Yet the Silent King knew not the C'tan's true nature, and instead granted the creature an audience. The Deceiver spoke of a war, fought long before the birth of the necrontyr, between the C'tan and the Old Ones. It was a war, he said, that the C'tan had lost. In the aftermath, and fearing the vengeance of the Old Ones, he and his brothers had hidden themselves away, hoping one day to find allies with whom they could finally bring the Old Ones to account. In return for aid, the Deceiver assured he and his brothers would deliver everything that the necrontyr craved. Unity could be theirs once again, and the immortality that they had sought for so long would finally be within their grasp. No price would there be for these great gifts, the Deceiver insisted, for they were boons to be bestowed upon valued allies. Thus did the Deceiver speak, and who can say how much of his tale was truth? It is doubtful whether even the Deceiver knew, for trickery had become so much a part of his existence that even he could no longer divine its root. Yet his words held sway over Szarekh, who like his ancestors before him, despaired of the divisions that were constantly tearing his people apart. For long solemn months, he debated the matter with the Triarch and the nobles of his royal court. Through it all, the only dissenting voice was that of Khan, the court astrologer, who foretold that the alliance would bring about a renaissance of glory, but destroy forever the soul of the necrontyr people. Yet desire and ambition swiftly overrode caution, and Khan's prophecy was dismissed. A terran year after the Deceiver had presented his proposition, the Triarch agreed to the alliance, and so forever doomed their species. With the pact between necrontyr and C'tan sealed, the star gods revealed the form that immortality would take, and the great biotransference began. Colossal biofurnaces roared day and night, consuming weak-bodied flesh and replacing it with enduring forms of living metal. As the cyclopean machines clamored, the C'tan swarmed about the biotransference sites, drinking in the torrent of cast-off life energy and growing ever stronger. As Szarekh watched the C'tan feast on the life essence of his people, he realized the terrible depth of his mistake. In many ways, he felt better than he had in solar decades. The countless aches and uncertainties of organic life now behind him, his new machine body was far mightier than the frail form he had tolerated for so long, and his thoughts were swifter and clearer than they had ever been. Yet there was an emptiness gnawing at his mind, an inexpressible holiness of spirit that defied rational explanation. In that moment, he knew with cold certainty that the price of physical immortality had been the loss of his soul. With great sorrow, the Silent King beheld the fate he had brought upon his people. The necrontyr were now but a memory, and the soulless necrons reborn in their place. Yet if the price had been steep, biotransference had fulfilled all of the promises that the C'tan had made. Even the lowliest of necrons was blessed with immortality. Age and radiation could little erode their new bodies, and only the most terrible of injuries could destroy them utterly. Likewise, the Necrons enjoyed a unity that the necrontyr had never known, though it was achieved through tyranny rather than consent. The biotransference process had embedded command protocols in every necron mind, granting Szarekh the unswerving loyalty of his subjects. With the C'tan and Necrons fighting as one, the Old Ones were now doomed to defeat. Glutted on the life force of the necrontyr, the empowered C'tan were nigh unstoppable and unleashed forces beyond comprehension. Planets were razed, suns extinguished, and whole systems devoured by black holes called into being by the reality warping powers of the star gods. Necron legions finally broached the webway and assailed the Old Ones in every corner of the galaxy. They brought under siege the fortresses of the Old Ones' allies, harvesting the life force of the defenders to feed their masters. Ultimately, beset by the implacable onset of the C'tan and the calamitous warp-spawned barrels they had themselves mistakenly unleashed, the Old Ones were defeated, scattered, and finally destroyed. Throughout the final stages of the war in heaven, Szarekh bided his time, waiting for the moment in which the C'tan would be vulnerable. Though the entire Necron race was his to command, he could not hope to oppose the C'tan at the height of their power, and even if he did and met with success, the Necrons would then have to finish the war in heaven alone. No, the Old Ones had to be defeated before the C'tan could be brought to account for the horror they had wrought. And so, when the C'tan finally won their great war, their triumph was short-lived. With one hated enemy finally defeated and the other spent from hard-fought victory, the Silent King at last led the Necrons in revolt. In their arrogance, the C'tan did not realize their danger until it was too late. The Necrons focused the unimaginable energies of the living universe into weapons too mighty for even the C'tan to endure, but the C'tan were immortal star-spawn, part of the fundamental fabric of reality, and therefore nigh impossible to destroy. So was each C'tan instead sundered into thousands of fragments, yet this was sufficient to the Silent King's goals. Indeed, he had known the C'tan's ultimate destruction to be impossible, and had drawn his plans accordingly. Each C'tan shard was bound within a tesseract labyrinth, as secure as a genie in a bottle. Though the cost of victory was high, millions had been destroyed as a consequence of rebellion, including all of the Triarch save the Silent King himself. The Necrons were once more in command of their own destiny. Yet even the defeat of the Old Ones and the C'tan alike, the Silent King saw that the time of the Necrons was over, for the moment at least. The mantle of galactic dominion would soon pass to the Eldari, a species who had fought alongside the Old Ones throughout the war in heaven, and had thus come to hate the Necrons and all their works. The Eldari had survived where the Old Ones had not, and the Necrons, weakened during the overthrow of the C'tan, could not stand against them. Yet the Silent King knew that the time of the Eldari would pass, as did the time of all flesh. So it was that the Silent King ordered the remaining Necron cities to be transformed into great tomb complexes threaded with stasis crypts. Let the Eldari shape the galaxy for a time. They were but ephemeral, whilst the Necrons were eternal. The Silent King's final command to his people was that they must sleep for 60 million Terran years, but awake ready to rebuild all that they had lost, to restore the dynasties to their former glory. This was the Silent King's last order, and as the last tomb world sealed its vaults, he destroyed the command protocols by which he had controlled his people, for he had failed them utterly. Without a backward glance, Szarekh, last of the Silent Kings, took ship into the blackness of intergalactic space, there to find whatever measure of solace or penance he could. Meanwhile, eons passed, and the Necrons slept on. For 60 million Terran years they slept, waiting for their chance to complete the Silent King's final order, to restore the Necron dynasties to their former glory. Then in 774 M41, the Silent King returned to the bounds of the galaxy once more. Having encountered the Tyranids in the intergalactic void, he recognized the threat they posed to the Necrons' apotheosis. If the Tyranids devoured all life in the galaxy, the Necrons would never find living bodies to house their consciousness. Thus did the Silent King break his self-imposed exile with the goal of marshalling his people against this new threat. When the Silent King returned, he did so with a new Triarch Council, joined by his fellow pharaohs Hapthatra the Radiant and Mosefet the Shadowed Hand atop the dais of Dominion. Additionally, he carries with him a bound C'tan, known as the Enchained. However, the Silent King had not anticipated the coma in which the majority of the Necrons still lie in the wake of the Great Sleep. Many tomb walls had been destroyed over the aeons, others still slumbered, and most of those that had awakened by the time of the 41st millennia were still disoriented or somehow damaged. Szarekh discovered that the Tyranids were just one of many threats facing the Necrons across the galaxy. Other alien races like humanity had swarmed over their tomb walls while they slept. Even worse, the Immaterium and its demonic inhabitants had begun to tear apart the fabric of real space, with the Great Rift eventually cutting the galaxy in half after 999 M41. In secret, the Silent King made pilgrimage from tomb wall to tomb wall, shielding his identity, working through unknowing Necron overlords and cryptics to cultivate a new belief in the Necron ascendancy. The Triarch Praetorians responded to his return, ready and willing to spread his influence even further. With the legions of his own dynasty at his call, Szarekh had the means to conduct large-scale campaigns, though he only fought where absolutely necessary, and where complete annihilation of the foe assured his continued concealment. It is the Silent King's current wish that the younger race's flawed attempts to destroy the Tyranids do not simply feed the hive fleets beyond the point where even a united Necron people have any hope of victory. In 955 M41, Commander Dante and the 3rd Company of the Blood Angels chapter battled against the Necron legions of the Silent King amidst the dusty wastes of the world of Gehenna. For 3 solar weeks, neither side could seize the upper hand, with Dante's tactical brilliance stretched to its limits, encountering the time-space manipulations of the Silent King. The stalemate was broken only when a Tyranid splinter fleet entered orbit, forcing the two armies to break off hostilities and fight the common foe. The impromptu alliance proved to be the Tyranids' undoing. Following the final battle at Devil's Crag, Dante and the Silent King went their separate ways, both forces too battle-worn to guarantee victory over the other, and at least for the Blood Angels, the idea of turning on those they had so recently fought alongside proved rather distasteful. All Necrons bear the mark of the Triarch, a brand upon their necrodermis skin that binds them to their race's ancient heritage. In the 41st millennium, the absence of the Silent King and the long years of the Great Sleep have transformed the Ankh of the Triarch into a reminder of faded glory. Some Necron dynasty nobles still see the symbol as the foundation of the Necron Empire to be reborn, others merely as an echo of a long-dead age. However, the Ankh remains a symbol of the Necrons, and even those who have lost faith in its power still bear it on a cartouche adorning the metallic torso. Despite cosmetic alterations, the shape of the Ankh remains unchanged, each exacting curve and line perfectly reproduced. Each dynasty also has its own glyphs, variations on the Ankh that identify its soldiers as part of a particular pharaoh's armies. Alright guys, thanks a lot for watching, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell to stay tuned for more.